Dear students, I would like to talk about anatomy and physiology of the ear today. As we all know, ear is not only an organ of hearing, but also an organ of equilibrium. As far as the study of the anatomy of the ear is concerned, for the convenience sake, we divide the ear into three portions: the external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. As you can see, these are the divisions. External ear consists of pinna and the external canal. And then there is middle ear, which consists of the tympanic membrane and ossicles, and then the inner ear, which looks like a snail shell. Coming back to the outer ear or inner ear, the pinna. Pinna is a fibrocartilaginous framework or which skin is tightly adhered. The margin of the pinna is called helix and the tip of the pinna is called the lobule. This lobule consists of pure fat. And there is deficiency here in the anterosuperior region of the pinna, which is called as incisura terminalis. The applied aspect of this particular area is, this is the area we take for the end oral incision during ear surgery. The other two incisions which we use for ear surgery are the post-oral incision and the permeatal incision. There are certain deficiencies in the cartilage of the pinna. They are called fissures of Santorini. Through these fissures of Santorini, sometimes the infection from the pinna extends into the parotid region. Now, the external canal. External canal is the only skin-lined cul-de-sac in the body. It has got outer 1/3 the cartilaginous portion, whereas the inner 2/3 is bony. Outer 2/3 has ceruminous glands and the hair follicles, whereas the bony part doesn't have any. The external canal is not a straight tube, it is tortuous. It is directed anteriorly and superiorly. So, if you want to straighten the pinna, you have to pull auricle outwards, upwards, and posteriorly to have a correct view of the tympanic membrane. The external canal, it is the area through which the sound vibrations they travel and strike the tympanic membrane. Coming to the blood supply. Let's speak about nerve supplies first. The fifth nerve, the trigeminal nerve, by means of its auriculotemporal branch, it supplies the outer surface of the pinna. The posterior surface of the outer surface of the pinna is supplied by the vagus nerve, and the inferior surface is supplied by the ninth nerve, that is glossopharyngeal nerve. The posterior surface, that is the ear, the area behind the pinna, is supplied by the greater auricular and lesser occipital nerves. Coming to the blood supply, the axonal canal and the pinna, they are supplied by superficial temporal artery branches and also the post-auricular arteries branches. And in the middle ear and also to the tympanic membrane, a branch from the deep temporal artery also supplies. The lymphatics from the axonal canal and the pinna, they end up in pre-auricular lymph nodes and also the superficial cervical lymph nodes along the interjugular vein and also the retroauricular lymph node. And we should be aware that these lymph nodes, they also drain the scalp. So any infection in the scalp also produces enlargement of these lymph nodes. Coming to the tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane, it is a oval, pinkish, thin membrane that separates the external ear from the middle ear cavity. As we all know, the ear is situated in the temporal bone, which lies on either side of the head. The temporal bone has got a mastoid portion and a tympanic portion and a squamous portion and a petrous portion medially and a styloid process. Now the tympanic, the ear is situated in the tympanic portion and the middle ear is situated in the tympanic portion. The tympanic membrane is lodged in a groove over in the axonal canal. That in this groove there is a fibrocartilaginous ring which you see in the light color, fibroosseous ring or fibrocartilaginous ring, that is called annulus tympanicus. This groove in which the annulus tympanicus is lodged is deficient superiorly. This area is called pars flaccida. Why it's called pars flaccida? The tympanic membrane is less dense here and it doesn't have a fibrous layer in comparison to the other part of the tympanic membrane. What do we call the other part of the tympanic membrane? It is called pars tensa. As we see strikingly here, there is a shadow. This is the handle of the malleus. Its direction is posterior. And sometimes you can see the includostepidial joint or shadow of incus, and you can see a bright light reflex also, usually at the level of the 7 o'clock. Of course, it is distorted here. So this is how a tympanic membrane, normal tympanic membrane looks like. That is in pale color, pale pinkish color. If it is bright red, that means it is congested and it is inflamed. As we already mentioned, the anterior portion is supplied by the auriculotemporal branch of the mandibular division of the fifth nerve, whereas the posterior half is supplied by the auricular branch of the vagus. Next is the middle ear. Middle ear, it is like a matchbox. It has a roof, medial wall, lateral wall, posterior wall, and a floor. The anterior wall consists of the opening of the eustachian tube and it is closely related to the temporomandibular joint. The anterior wall of the middle ear is separated from the temporomandibular joint by a very, very vital structure, that is the internal carotid artery. The tensor tympani muscle, it traverses in its canal very close to the eustachian tube in the anterior wall of the middle ear. The middle ear, once again, for the convenience sake, it is divided into epitympanum. Epitympanum is above, whereas the mesotympanum, that is the tympanic cavity just corresponding to the tympanic membrane, and the hypotympanum, that is just below the level of the tympanic membrane, that is hypotympanum. And the area of the tympanic cavity or middle ear cavity close to the opening of the eustachian tube is called protympanum. Coming back to the middle ear cavity, what does it contain? It contains 3 bones, 2 muscles, 2 nerves, and last but not the least, air. Air is very, very essential part of the middle ear cavity. It is essential because it helps in the active vibration of the middle ear structures while we hear the sound. So, if there is cold, if there is nasal obstruction, there is no sufficient air that passes through the nose, from the nose into the eustachian tube, from the eustachian tube into middle ear cavity. As a result, we will suffer from blocking of the ears. So, what is the function of the eustachian tube? It equalizes the pressure both outside and inside the tympanic membrane. We will take up the aortic barotrauma subsequently. The eustachian tube plays a great role in the aortic barotrauma. So, it's essential that the pressure both outside and inside the tympanic membrane should be equal. The middle ear contains 3 bones. They are the smallest bones in the body. The first bone is called malleus, second bone is incus, the third bone is stapes. Malleus looks like a hammer, whereas incus looks like an anvil, and stapes looks like a stirrup. Coming to the other walls of the tympanic cavity. Medial wall, which is the most important wall, it has got a prominent bulge, prominent smooth bulge. It is called promontory. Promontory corresponds to the basal term of the cochlea of the inner ear. And over the promontory, there are 2 openings. One is oval, other is round. The oval opening is called oval window, whereas the other one is called round window. This oval window articulates with the footplate of the stapes, whereas round window has got a thin membrane covering it. It is called secondary tympanic membrane or round window membrane. And last but not the least, traversing from anterior to posteriorly, the 7th nerve, that is the facial nerve, the horizontal segment, it traverses. Sometimes, usually it traverses in a bony covering. Sometimes the bony covering might be missing. It will be dehiscent. After traversing horizontally, the facial nerve takes a smooth curve. This is called second genu. From then it becomes the vertical portion or the mastoid portion, and then it comes out of the temporal bone by means of through the stylomastoid foramen medial to the styloid process and enters the space between the superficial and the deep lobe of the parotid gland. This is the picture of the ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes. Malleus has got a head, a neck, a short process, and a handle. This malleus handle, it is in close relation to the tympanic membrane, as you have seen just now. The malleus head is not seen. It is in the attic region. In the attic region, it articulates with the body of the incus by means of a incudomalleolar joint, which is a synovial joint. The incus has got a body and a short process and a long process. The long process terminates as a lenticular process which articulates with the stapes head. Stapes has got a head, a neck, anterior and posterior crura, and a footplate. This footplate of stapes, it articulates with the oval window of the promontory. As you have already mentioned about the eustachian tube in its proximal 2/3 part is bony, whereas the distal 1/3 part is cartilaginous. The distal 1/3 part, the cartilaginous portion, it is a C-shaped cartilage. The free surface of the C is occupied by the tensor palatini muscle. What is the action of tensor palatini muscle? It opens the eustachian tube for the aeration of the middle ear cavity. And this is the route of the pathogens which enter occasionally from the nasopharynx into the middle ear cavity and produce otitis media. Coming about the two muscles. The two muscles are, number one is tensor tympani muscle, number two is stapedius muscle. The tensor tympani muscle, it takes its origin from its canal for tensor tympani along with a portion of the sphenoid bone nearby and traverses backwards into the middle ear cavity close to the eustachian tube, takes an acute bend near the process cochleariformis and gets attached at the neck of the malleus. What's its action? When you hear a loud sound, it contracts and increases the tension of the drum head and prevents damage to the inner ear. Coming to the other muscle, that is the stapedius muscle. Stapedius muscle is the smallest skeletal muscle in the body, and its action is, once you hear a very, very loud sound, it contracts and disengages the footplate of the stapes from the oval window region. Thus gives enough protection for the inner ear from the loud blasting noises. In stapedectomy operation, we cut the stapedius muscle. So what happens? The stapedectomized individuals who are suffering from otosclerosis, they will not have this protection. They should take a lot of care not to hear loud sounds. When they hear loud sounds, they should keep something in the ear like a cotton wool or an ear plug to protect themselves from damage. And what about the inferior wall? Inferior wall of the middle ear cavity is separated from the jugular bulb by a thin plate of bone. Jugular bulb is very closely related to the floor of the middle ear cavity. Sometimes this thin bone may be dehiscent. So we should be very, very careful during ear surgery while elevating the drum. Sometimes you may see the angry looking jugular bulb in the middle ear cavity, which is dehiscent. Next is the posterior wall. The posterior wall has got a projection, small projection, which is called pyramid, through which the stapedius muscle takes origin before inserting itself into the head of the stapes. The lateral wall, obviously it contains the tympanic membrane, medial surface, and along with the Malleus handle, and a small nerve that is cauda-tympani nerve. It traverses the middle ear cavity from posterior to anterior region to disappear into the canal of the cauda-tympani nerve, which carries taste fibers from the anterior 2/3 of the neck, anterior 2/3 of the tongue. And another important feature in the posterior wall is the facial nerve, which we have already mentioned. That is the vertical portion of the facial nerve. Medial to the facial nerve, there is a deep furrow that is called sinus tympani. The significance of the sinus tympani is the main disease of the middle ear cavity, that is cholecystoma. Sometimes it will be hidden in this area. This stapedius, this sinus tympani region, it continues inferiorly as hypotympanum. Coming to the third part of the ear, that is the middlemost part, that is the inner ear. Inner ear, it is very securely placed by nature in the toughest bone in the body, that is the petrous part of the temporal bone. Now, this particular inner ear is responsible not only for hearing but also for the balance. The anteriormost portion of the inner ear is the cochlea, whereas the posterior part is called the vestibular labyrinth. In total, the bony labyrinth in which the inner ear is situated, it contains the membranous labyrinth. In between the bony labyrinth and membranous labyrinth, there is a fluid called perilymph. Inside the membranous labyrinth, there is a fluid called endolymph. The cochlea, which is concerned with hearing, it is like a sail shell with 2.5 turns. The basal turn, the middle turn, and the apical turn. Basal turn, it is towards the external canal, whereas apical turn, it faces towards the internal carotid artery. From the cochlea, the cochlear nerve emerges. Coming to the posterior part, that is the vestibular labyrinth. Vestibular labyrinth contains two sacs that are called atricle and saccule, and 3 semicircular canals which are perpendicular to each other. You can imagine like this. See, on the right side, this is the arrangement. The 3 semicircular canals are called, first one is horizontal semicircular canal, second is the superior semicircular canal, and posterior is the posterior semicircular canal. In the diagram, this is the superior semicircular canal, and this is the horizontal semicircular canal, whereas this is the posterior semicircular canal. Now, the semicircular canals at one of its ends, they are swollen. They are called ampulla of the semicircular canal. The importance of ampulla of the semicircular canal is they enlarge the specialized sensory epithelium that is responsible for the balance. These three semicircular canals, they open into the vestibule by means of 5 openings, not 6, because the posterior semicircular canal and also the lateral semicircular canal, they open together by what is known as crus commune. That means there are 5 openings in the vestibule rather than 6 openings. And how does the membranous cochlea look like when you cut across? You can see the 3 chambers. The 3 chambers are scala vestibuli, scala media, and scala tympani. Scala vestibuli, it corresponds to the bowel window which I was mentioning in the medullary cavity. Scala tympani, it corresponds to the round window. The middle part is called the scala media, which lodges the most important special organ, that is the organ of Corti. Organ of Corti, it looks like this, with a tectorial membrane and a triangular shaped area having outer cells, outer hair cells and inner hair cells based on the basilar membrane. The outer hair cells and inner hair cells, they are very specialized hair cells. They get excited by each vibration of the tectorial membrane. And the inside of the triangular area is, there is cortis lymph, whose action is not known. At the base of these hair cells, there are small, very, very fine nerve fibers which carry the impulses. Coming to the semicircular canals, the superior canal and the posterior canal together, they form the superior vestibular nerve, whereas the horizontal canal, it forms the inferior vestibular nerve. Both the superior vestibular nerve and the facial nerve and the cochlear nerve, they traverse together in the external auditory canal, in the internal auditory canal. So in the internal auditory canal, if you dissect the internal auditory canal from behind through the mastoid process, then we can see the superior vestibular nerve first, and below that there is inferior vestibular nerve, and anterior to it the facial nerve, and below it the cochlear nerve. This is the picture of the enlarged picture of the organ of Corti. Not only that, as far as the anatomy of the ear is concerned, the medullary cavity, the tympanic cavity which I was mentioning, it has got an opening into the mastoid bone that is called auditus ad antrum. This auditus ad antrum, it opens into a small round cell called mastoid antrum. The entire mastoid bone it is occupied by air cell systems. There are different groups of air cells, like the periantral cells surrounding the master antrum, the supralabyrinthine group of cells over the labyrinth, and the retrolabyrinthine cells, infralabyrinthine cells, cells at the synovial angle, the tip cells, the petrous cells, and the zygomatic cells, and so on. The different groups of master air cells, they are intercommunicated, they drain into the master antrum. At the medial wall of the adytus ad antrum, the projection of the dome of the lateral semicircular canal can be seen. Just a little below that, you will find the second genu of the facial nerve. This particular anatomical point we'll take advantage of while operating, because if we go below the level of the dome of the lateral semicircular canal, you are liable to injure the facial nerve. This is in short the anatomy of the temporal bone and anatomy of the ear. Now, a word about the physiology of the hearing. Now, how do we hear? Imagine there is a sound source which is making sound. The sound traverses in the air by means of convulsions and rarefactions, and the ear in the catching the sound, the pinna plays a very minute role. Of course, if you enhance the pinna with your palm of your hand, it may slightly amplify the sound. Now, the sound waves through the external canal, they traverse and touch the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane vibrates. Now, the sound energy, it is changed to mechanical energy in the middle ear. From the mechanical energy, the inner ear fluids, they vibrate, and the hair cells, they get excited, and it is converted into electrical energy, and the vibrations, the electrical impulses, they are carried to through the auditory nerve. In this process, the tympanic membrane, once vibrates, there is some functional advantage, because the functional area of the tympanic membrane is 14 times more than the size of the wall window. In the same way, once the vibrations of the tympanic membrane, they are carried into the ossicles, as I have just now mentioned, malleus, incus, and stapes, they are attached to each other in such a way that there is a lever advantage. You just remember your physics knowledge, that is, levering is whenever an individual wants to lift a huge stone, he will keep a small stone underneath and he will try to lift it by means of a heavy rod, so that there is some levering advantage. So the ossicular chain will have 1.3 times more advantage when compared to a straight line. So all of them put together, the total advantage of the middle ear transformer mechanism. Let us say this is a transformer mechanism. The total transformer mechanism, the advantage is 18 times more than the normal. Now these vibrations, they go into the inner ear, and in the inner ear, the inner ear fluids, they get vibrated, and these vibrations, they are caught by the basilar membrane. Once basilar membrane vibrates, the tectorial membrane also vibrates, and these vibrations produce shearing strains for the hair cells. And these shearing strains, they produce depolarization of the nerve endings, and nerve impulses are created, and the nerve impulses, they are carried through the auditory nerve fibers into the eighth nerve. Now, how do we hear? Exact mechanism, it is not very clear. There are some hypotheses. The first hypothesis is Helmholtz theory. According to Helmholtz theory, there is a particular place for a particular frequency or the basilar membrane. That is why this is also called place theory. Just like the strings of a piano, for a particular frequency, a particular place is there. This theory states there is a particular place for a particular frequency in the basilar membrane too. So if a particular frequency is presented, a particular place in the basilar membrane is stimulated, according to this Helmholtz theory. But this Helmholtz theory is discarded because the scientists, they have divided the basilar membrane under electron microscopy by microscissors and saw. What will happen if you cut a piano string? Immediately it retracts because it is under high tension. As per this theory, the basilar membrane should be under high tension, and if you cut it, the cut edges should retract. But it wasn't like that. So this particular theory is discarded. Now the second theory is Rutherford's telephone theory. What does Rutherford telephone theory state? According to this, for each frequency, the entire basilar membrane vibrates, and the vibrations, they are carried through the auditory nerve, and the vibrations, the impulses, they are felt in the auditory cortex in the temporal lobe, and it is in the auditory cortex they are perceived and recognized. But this theory reduces the highly specialized auditory nerve into ordinary telephone wire, and it is not accepted by many people. The third theory, that is called Weaver's traveling wave theory of transverse vibrations, it is more accepted. As per this, there is a place for each frequency in the basilar membrane. For each frequency, the entire vibration, the entire basilar membrane vibrates, and these vibrations, they are carried as traveling waves into the auditory nerve. According to this theory, the basilar membrane at the base of the cochlea, they are concerned, it is concerned with the higher frequencies, whereas the apical turn, they are concerned with the lower frequencies. As I already mentioned, ear is not only an organ of hearing, but also an organ of equilibrium. Equilibrium, the sense of equilibrium, is sometimes known as the sixth sense. But the sense of equilibrium compared with lower animals, it is not well developed in human beings. And the vestibular labyrinth, it is not very much important in human beings when compared with lower animals. An individual who can still survive even though the vestibular labyrinth is destroyed, because there are other structures which will actively help individuals in maintaining the equilibrium. They are the number one is vision, number two is by proprioception. What is proprioception? Proprioception is these sensations, they are senses, they are carried from the joints, ligaments, and the bone. And the muscles rather. Now, if you stimulate the inner ear, you may get nystagmus in the eyes. What is nystagmus? Nystagmus is involuntary to and fro movements of the eyeball when inner ear is stimulated. If you stimulate the horizontal canal, you will find horizontal nystagmus. If you stimulate the superior canal, you will find the vertical nystagmus. Whereas if you stimulate the posterior canal, you will find rotatory type of nystagmus. Now, how does this balance occurs? This balance occurs by this particular vestibular labyrinth. The utricle and the saccule, which are perpendicular to each other, they are concerned with the linear acceleration. Whereas the semicircular canals, they are concerned with angular acceleration. Now, in case of human beings, the biggest linear force that acts on him is nothing but the gravity. Now, suppose the individual is traveling in a bus. The bus travels and the body is in continuous motion. Suddenly, if the bus stops, then the individual will have a sudden movement. That is because of the action of the vestibular labyrinth. The force is acting in a horizontal manner, whereas the gravity is acting in the vertical manner. Now, if the force suddenly stops, the body takes a resultant, that means via media between these two. It is because of the active action of the vestibular labyrinth. That means the reflexes, they act and they control the body so that we will control the balance. In the same way, if we turn round and round, say in a circulating chair, then the semicircular canals, especially if you turn round and round, the horizontal semicircular canals, they get stimulated. If you turn towards right side, the endolimb, it traverses on the right side away from the ampulla, whereas on the left side, the endolimb traverses towards the ampulla. The movement of the endolimb towards the ampulla is called auriculopetal, whereas the endolimb, movement of the endolimb away from the ampulla is called auriculofugal. According to Eval's law, the movement of the endolimb towards the ampulla, that is auriculopetal movements, they produce more electrical impulses than the other. So as a result, what happens? on the left side, the movement is atriclopetal, and the impulses they are carried to the eye, and the eyes are pulled towards the left side. So what happens when we turn to the right side? There will be nystagmus towards the left side. So there is a push-pull mechanism in the body. The labyrinth always pushes the head towards the opposite side. So because of the push-pull moment, the head is in the equilibrium position. And if there is any disturbance, the different reflexes like the vestibulo-ocular reflex, the second one is vestibulo-cervical reflex, the third one is vestibulo-spinal reflex. These three reflexes, they come into action along with the cerebellum, which fine-tunes these reflexes. The equilibrium is attained. There is specialized sensory epithelium in the atrial saccule and semicircular canals. In the atrial and this saccule, the specialized sensory epithelium is called macula, over macula there are what are known as otolith organ or otolith membrane, over which there is what are known as autoconia. Autoconia are the calcium carbide crystals. Now, with the slightest movement of the head, these specialized structure, it will get a displacement and nerve impulses, they start. In the same way, in the ampulla, the specialized organ, specialized apparatus is called crista ampullaris. Over this crista ampullaris, there is what is known as the gelatinous material called the cupula. This cupula is also very, very sensitive, like otolithic membrane. With the slightest moment, it gets disturbed, and it will get the change in its position. So this is the vestibulo-ocular reflex, and if the vestibule is stimulated, then immediately the impulses are carried from the vestibular nucleus into the motor nucleus of the extraocular muscles, and the nystagmus appears. And there is vestibulospinal reflex. The vestibulospinal reflex, that is the impulses, they are carried from the vestibule into the different areas of the spinal cord and the brain, and produces the vertebro-cervical reflex. By means of this reflex, the head and the body, they become stable and the equilibrium is attained. The third reflex is vestibulospinal reflex. As you see, if you blindfold the individual and put in the particular special arrangement over it, and if you tilting balance, if you tilt it, still the individual is able to maintain the steady posture. This is because of the vestibulospinal reflex. And if there is disturbance in the ear, be in the external ear or in the middle ear or in the inner ear, there will be disturbance of the equilibrium and individual feels the vertigo. What is vertigo? Vertigo is the false sense of motion with respect to the surroundings. So the individual feels this giddiness, otherwise known as dizziness or vertigo or unsteadiness, if there is disturbance of these particular anatomical regions. Thank you.